Christopher. That's nice. You did a good job.
Thanks.
First of all, I want to say, sometimes I can get going a little fast. So just slow me down. And if any time during this lecture that you have a question, maybe I can answer it. Please feel free to interrupt me. Tell me to wait, go back, hold on. And but I have a lot to get through. And what I thought, well, you know, I'm going to take you through a timeline of piracy. You know, where it all kind of starts. And I figured I could do that by all the parts that I worked at that have had something to do with piracy. Now, most of the time when I was working in these parts, I didn't know I was touching on piracy.
I have no idea. I don't think it's mine. Mine was turned off.
About now.
Yeah.
Did you see?
Let me try this.
Switch.
Let's switch mics.
Is there a mic
All those
switch?
pirates, they're terrible.
Yeah, I know. Start to steal the show. Okay, so in order to you know, get the big picture, you know, everybody's got to get to the Caribbean, right? Because we're talking about English pirates, French pirates, Spanish pirates, the whole 9 yards, Dutch. And so to understand the concept of how everything has to work, they have to get there and they have to leave there. And so I put this map of currents up and you can see, let's see if I get this corner to work. So you can see here's England, and if they want to get to the Caribbean, they've got to drop all the way down here to the Azores and then find their way in. Now, the Spanish don't have to go that far. So they can, maybe that's why they discovered it first. I don't know. And then the English, they have to drop all the way down, and then to go home, they have to get all the way up to North Carolina if they can make the right turn to get back to England. So this is really important for the early pirates. And then the Spanish, they can usually turn around St. Augustine. So that one, their fort there at St. Augustine was so important because that was kind of their turning point. So, I already mentioned we're going to kind of go through a timeline of pirates. So we're going to start off at the very beginning. And then I'm going to try to mention some pirates that you never thought were pirates. You can't believe these guys are pirates. We're going to talk about where all these pirates come from. So when you get into the Caribbean, into the 1600s and 1500s, you have thousands of pirates. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Not just a few. And pirate names and how they dress. So I thought, well, maybe some of the folks during the Pirate Club might be interested in original drawings of pirates of the time period.
Yes.
And then pirate discoveries. Yes, they're out there finding things before anybody else does. Pirateers and pirate business, how the operations work. I mean, you don't just be a pirate, you gotta have a way to make money, right? You know, here you got all this boat full of cutthroat deals that you got in your cargo, and you're like, what am I doing with it? And then archaeology, finding archaeology in the pirate record. Let me make sure I covered everything. And then I wanted to add, who are the bad guys? And I'm just going to go ahead and answer that question right now. Because all of my research in pirates, this one's kind of scratchy, sorry. What I found was that there were no good guys. People that, are legitimate businessmen, they're over there hitting people over the head in Africa and bringing them over here and enslaving them. And then you have them over in England, France, and all those countries, and hitting the young boys over the head out in the countryside and in the cities, and throwing them in indentured service, and they die. England killed 6 million white boys in the 1600s. Yeah, it was awful. And so, you know, you have to ask yourself, who are the good guys? I mean, the pirates are just basically giving you a service. They're not really nice people. But the plantation owners, they're not nice people either. The British Navy, you know, when you get to the 1700s, the whole reason that a lot of these guys are out there attacking British ships is because they've been so mistreated on these British ships and on the British plantations. So, they were the good guys.
You ready to move?
So, I want to bring up this map to kind of take us to where we're going. And if you go all the way up to the top, you know, you've got Roanoke and the Outer Banks. So I'm going to touch on some work I did there. I did do a little work at Overcoat where Blackbeard's castle, where Blackbeard's ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, went down. I know all the guys that worked on it. We had great conversations. Of course, we've got Amelia Island. We're going to touch on St. Augustine, of course, Biscayne National Park, Dry Tortugas. You need to know where Havana and San Juan and St. Kitts and the Virgin Islands are right next to San Juan. Alavache, Port Royal, Havana. This little island called Isla de Providencia, it's known as Providence Island. It's off the coast of Cartagena and Nicaragua. And then right along that coast of Belize right there, that's known as the Mosquito Coast. And that is an important place for pirates as well. Of course, the towns that are being attacked by pirates, Maracaibo, Cartagena, Portobello, Veracruz, all of those are they're the reason why you're going to have pirates come into this area. They're going to steal from these towns. Okay, so if I need to go back to that map, just let me know. So here I am, this young kid, boy, out of Chattanooga. I've got my degree in archaeology, and I'm working for the university up there. But I hear about there's this underwater archaeology program at Florida State. And I'm like, okay. So I go down there and I list in the program, and within a few months, I'm on a research vessel in the Dry Tortugas. I'm like, well, pinch me. This is everything I've dreamed of. So here I am. This is my first day. We're at Fort Jefferson, which is a lot like Fort Clinch. It's, at the same time as those coastal fortifications were built. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's amazing. There's one guy there that's famous that you might have heard of, Mr. Mudd. Yeah. So he's the guy that takes care of Wilson Boot. He was just doing his doctor's, what a doctor does, right? But that's how he ended up with, your name is Mudd. Okay. All right, so while we're working at Tortugas, I did several years down there. And the left picture is just this big old conglomerate of, this is what an artifact looks like when it comes out of the sea. We cleaned it up, and it was one of these built-up guns. They're made by blacksmiths. And this is not the one. I couldn't get the picture of the one because the government was shut down. But what's amazing about these guns is that they're made by blacksmiths, and they're breech loading. So they have like this beer jug kind of thing that they filled with the shot and the mortar, and they could literally just put them in there and fire it off and put them in and break the decks. It was one of the pirates' most famous guns. And the gun is known as a murderer. And I don't know if we get the word from the gun or if it was there before, but it did a good job of killing your enemy, but it also did a good job of killing you.
But who made it?
Who made it?
Yes.
Blacksmiths.
Oh, right.
They're not cast. So that's just when you're in the 1500s when you find one of these guns. So yes, a great pirate gun. But was I thinking about pirates then? No. We were just mapping Spanish ships, which when you think about it, who really are the first pirates? I mean, it's Spain. They come over here. They steal all of the Native Americans' gold, silver. So they're your original pirates. I don't feel bad for them when everybody else goes for them, because they're terrible. So then from Tortugas, I was transferred to doing a lot of archaeology at Biscayne National Park. And me and a buddy one summer found 37 shipwrecks. And some of them were Spanish galleons. This one is one of them. And if you want to know what most shipwrecks look like underwater, they're a pile of rocks. This is the ballast that holds the ship. And then you'll find, most oftentimes, if you're lucky, you'll find wooden timbers up underneath and buried in the sand. So, I'm going to turn to Puerto Rico. And, let me make sure I get everything. So, it's 1992, and Rosselló, the governor, decides he's going to change the whole footprint of old San Juan. So for the king and queen of Spain before they come. Of course, there's a lot of indigenous people over there in San Juan are like, why are we care about the king and queen of Spain? But anyway, they decided to dig a 3 football fields long, this trench. And it was 50 feet deep. And they had gone down into this huge midden that was buried in there. And in that midden were just, you take it was just thick. And, you grab a handful of you would have 20 artifacts in your hand. It was so rich. It was where all the artifacts were being washed out into the city, into that big trench right there. So, in those artifacts, they were 90% English. Piracy. They were either smuggling the stuff in from England, or they were robbing the English. And so you had Spanish pirates out there on the seas throughout this time period. They're always there. Now, I'm going to just jump up here to El Morro. Have any of y'all been at El Morro? On San Juan?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
So you know what we're talking about. So I was stationed there for 3 years. Dragged my family there, and we lived in Old San Juan. It was pretty amazing. And eventually we ended up working on a bastion. Let me make sure I get the point right off of the end right here. I'm going to turn to that picture in just a minute. And we had to dig a 15-foot deep excavation in the moat of El Morro, which really was incredible. And doing that, we came down on a portion of the fort that would have been there in the 1500s and the 1600s. So we were touching on that fortification era that Sir Francis Drake is attacking, the Earl of Cumberland, that Dutch guy that took it over and everybody died and he had to leave. So everybody attacked Puerto Rico because this is where all the gold and silver were. Havana and Puerto Rico before you went up and made your right turn at St. Augustine. So the Army Corps of Engineers decided they wanted to sandwich this hillside. They thought it was going to slope into the sea. I don't really believe it, but it was a project they had. They had $48 million. And so they were going to build, they were going to put in big metal curtain rods back here, and they were going to cut all of this in half into 3 pieces. And I was like, no, let's take a look and see what's there. And so, sure enough, there was this entire bastion. And some of it went back to the 1500s. And that's me on a backhoe digging it out. Sometimes you use, a little woman's blush brush, and sometimes it takes a backhoe. Here's another picture of it. It was modified throughout the time period. It ended up with cannons on it. And this is the portion of it that would have been there when Sir Francis Drake attacked. But there's other portions of this book that were there too. Again, I'm kind of following Sir Francis Drake in his battles. So I'm going to go to another one, the Lost Colony. Does everybody know about the Lost Colony? Do I need to describe it?
Yes.
Yes? No?
Yes.
Well, long story short, there was these people that decided, long before Plymouth Rock, the first colonists that were going to try to settle, and they were pirates. That's just why I'm bringing them up. So they, Raleigh, Ralph Lane had, I should go back. I need to talk about what is Drake. Drake is known as Queen Elizabeth's Sea Dogs. Drake, Frobisher, Ralph Lane, Raleigh, John White, all of these guys were great sea captains. And they were giving the Spanish all kinds of trouble in the Caribbean. The French had been giving the Spanish trouble in the Caribbean for even longer. In fact, they were attacking in 1520, just 20 years after they found the New World. And France and Spain had to come up with a treaty. And it was really the first treaty where whatever happens over there stays over there. Because we have this huge border over here. We can't be fighting all the time. But believe me, France and Spain fought all the time in the Caribbean. They were constantly at war. So, so all of these pirates, including Drake, they needed a place to get some water and get their food before they go back to England. This is why I brought up the chart with the currents, right? So, Ralph Lane had gone there, made the Indians mad, and he got rescued by Sir Francis Drake. And then within a year, they bring in these separatists from England. They're trying to get away from the Church of England. And they're being backed by Sir Walter Raleigh. They're crazy enough to go over here because it's really dangerous. And so they dropped down to the Canaries, and then in and around that area, they captured an English ship. That's not very nice, since you're English. Sounds like a bit like piracy. And then they get down to Puerto Rico, and they attack Puerto Rico, and they take 3 Spanish prizes in Puerto Rico. So they're pirates. These men, women, and children that are going to set up this colony are in the business of piracy, and they're making this colony so that they can outfit the boats before they go back to England for all the other pirates. Is this a bit of history, maybe? I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not touching on a lot of history y'all already know. But anyway, as we know, they disappear, right? John White goes back. He goes back to get supplies. It's 1587. Now, y'all said y'all didn't mind my dates too much, so that's good. Because what happens the next year is critical to the entire history of the Americas. So in 1588, Drake has been picking at the Spanish for years now. He's attacked them in the Pacific. He's attacked them in the New World. He's hit them at all kinds of places. And so Spain's had enough. So they amassed all of their warships. All of them. And they decide they're going to attack England, right? John White's sailed back. Drake's there. Hawkins is there. They're ready for him. And so what happens? The Spanish fleet's defeated. And in that first year, after that Spanish fleet's defeated, the English take 200 Spanish prizes in the Caribbean. They had destroyed their military. So the whole thing opens up.
Yep.
So I got to dig there about 3 times, and really had a good time. I got to work with Sir Ivor Hume, who is famous for his work at Williamsburg, Bill Kelso, who's famous for Jamestown. We had the Discovery Channel there. You know, we were scraping this unit, and, you know, they did a little smoke going across. You might can find it somewhere on YouTube, probably. But we didn't find anything until the very end. But I don't have time to tell that story. But at the end, I can, if y'all are interested, if we have time. So now let's move to St. Augustine and more pirates. And of course, Sir Francis Drake attacks St. Augustine, steals all the gold and silver there. This fort's not built yet. And then we get up to the 1680s, and this, if you go on the Park Service website, they have this picture of Sorrel, the pirate that attacked. The fort's still not built in 1680s. But Sorrel does such a horrible job of stealing all their money that it's because of his piracy that causes the Spanish to build this fort. Okay, so my last big project was in the Lost Colony, and then I was shipped off to Puerto Rico for 3 years, and after having a good time with the Army Corps of Engineers trying to save sites, I was brought over here to dig this Taino site. The Taino, that's the word for the people that greeted Columbus in the New World. And I had found where...
Where are you?
From St. John, Virgin Islands. Thank you, dear. I need somebody to keep me straight. It was being eroded away by it's just the hurricanes just beginning to take it and take it and take it. And so it was decided I would excavate it. And so I got a team together with a lot of college students coming to help me all the time. And we went through 500 years of a place where they made offerings to their ancestors. We got golden eyes and mother of pearl and all these effigy vessels. But on the others, at the same time, we were excavating a pirate site. We didn't know it. And I'm still not thinking about pirates. Archaeologists don't dig up pirates, right? We're more accredited. We thought that kind of archaeologist. Anyway, this became our archaeology lab, and I soon learned as we were digging and we were diving into the historic records, it may have been built in the 1680s. It's cut in half now since a hurricane. If I hadn't dug this out, we would have lost it all. So on the other side of that building, we were excavating this other house that was an archaeology site. And we went from 1840s, we went through the 1733 slave rebellion where they burned this house down. And at the very bottom, we found these kind of jugs, which date to the mid-1600s. They're called Bellarmine jugs or Bartman bottles, but they're also known as witches' bottles. And you would bury them at the threshold of your house to keep witches away. And you would put things like hat pins in there and tacks and broken glass and maybe some of your pee or hair, some blood, and bury it at your threshold. And it was supposed to protect you from witches. Well, we actually found a piece of one of those at the threshold of this house, which was pretty incredible. A few years later, Hurricane Earl came through, and just in front of that, we had to rescue a woman that was washing out to sea as a skeleton, and she didn't have a head. It was like, now I'm not saying they're connected, but it's kind of interesting that they were, the proximity was pretty good. Anybody have any questions so far? We're all good. Okay, so now we're going to go to the 1600s. We've been through the sea dogs. I want to just go back just a little bit to mention a few other pirate folks so that we can kind of grasp what's going on before I get to Tortuga and how Tortuga ties to the Virgin Islands and how it also just ties everything together. But, so we're in the 1500s, and we've got Queen Elizabeth's sea bears. We also have Queen Elizabeth's sea dogs. The Dutch are trying to win their freedom from the Habsburgs and the Catholic Church. So they've turned Lutheran, and they create their own pirate navy. And they absolutely hate the Catholics, because they're now Protestants, kind of like the British. And so you got this whole Dutch navy full of pirates that are coming in and stealing prizes. And then you have the French corsairs. And then the Dutch were often known as freebooters, and the Spanish would call them filibusters as a term for piracy. And then we'll touch on Buccaneers in just a minute. But this is where you really get the term Buccaneer. So remember I mentioned that little island over there by Nicaragua? It's like really tiny. Puritans, of all people, they went there, seeking to, do their own thing, have their own church, and they try to make a go of being planters, but that didn't last long. So they became pirates. These sweet Puritans became pirates. And where did they go? Well, they were over there where there's not too much flow of traffic, and so they moved to Tortuga. And Tortuga is located just on the north side of Haiti. And they set up shop there in the 1630s. And by the 1650s, well, somewhere between the 1630s and 1650s, you have the development of the Buccaneers. And so they're mostly on Haiti. They're killing the cows that the Spanish had left there for them to refuel their boats with. They get their name because they dry out their meat on what they call boucans, which becomes the terminology for the Buccaneers. They were excellent shots with those rifles. And so they made that transgression from being cattle hunters to being pirates. And then we get into the period of about 1650. So there's this guy, his name is Alexander Esquilima. And he becomes an indentured servant. And like so many others, he is one of those that's been dragged over to the New World. And, he almost dies as an indentured servant. And then he's fought by a surgeon. And he says, okay, you're going to pay me back by being a pirate. Now, most of these indentured servants, if they survive the 5 years, they only had one choice. They don't have the money to go back to where they came from. All these kids that have been, coerced in there, and all these convicts that are trying to escape, all these Africans that are trying to escape, their only choice is to become pirates. And that's how you end up with thousands and thousands of pirates. And they're of all different nationalities. I mean, there's Germans, there's Portuguese, there's French, there's Spanish, there's many African nations that are involved. So you have all of these people that are just trying to survive. And what do? You just become a pirate. Because you don't have anywhere, you can't go to that plantation. You just barely live through the culture that you just came from. So anyway, here we are. We're about in the 1650s. Esquilima is over there. He ends up sailing with all of these pirates. And these are what they looked like in the 1650s. So you've got Leonas, you got, where's that one guy? Rock, the Brazilian guy. You have a French guy, Portuguese. I think this one's from Brazil. And then you have Captain Morgan. And he really talks a lot about Captain Morgan. And as you hear him describing Captain Morgan, you realize he's a real pirate. Even though I think he's got some pedigree in England. But he is a true pirate and makes a fortune attacking all of these cities. And you can see he's got a real navy. And in fact, the governor of Puerto Rico said, look, if we don't have this pirate navy, we can't defend ourselves against the Spanish. They would run over us immediately. So that these pirates were many countries' navies. And most of the governors that are on all of these islands, they're giving out letter of marks. But most of the pirates are just going out and taking whoever they want. But if you have a group of pirates and they come from your island, when they come back, they have to give you 10%. And that's part of how the pirate business works. So they have to pay the governor 10% for kind of him offering the port that they come from. So, I'm on St. John, and my buddies that I've worked with in the Dry Tortugas and in Biscayne, Dr. Roanoke and Ewan, they decide that they want to write about pirates. And they want to give all the other archaeologists ideas about pirates. Because they're doing pirate archaeology on Queen Anne's Revenge, they're doing pirate archaeology in Madagascar, and in Ireland, and all these different places. So they think, well, you know what? We'll put an edited volume together, and so they printed their first one, X Marks the Spot, the Archaeology of Piracy. So I read it, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't really think about too much of it at the time until I started mapping out all these historic plantations on St. John in the Virgin Islands. For 11 years, I brought Danish students to the island, but they worked for the park for 4 years, and they would go into the archives, and everything is in Gothic Danish. And so they would dig out all the stories and help me map where all the people that were there in the 1600s and 1700s. And I started seeing a pattern. And I started asking my question, what's going on here? Something's not right. Anyway, this is St. John, and this is Coral Bay, and of course, you can see how they started mapping out all these squares. The work was mosquito-y, dirty, and muddy, just like archaeology is supposed to be, right? And you can see how complicated all of these estates were, and they were constantly changing owners and constantly being abandoned or taken over by another plantation. So it was a fantastic puzzle. And I started seeing that there were some irregularities in the artifacts that I was recovering. So one plantation would be like, there wouldn't be hardly anything there. And this is in an area where you really can't grow much, like maybe a little cotton. So the people that are living there are living on the edge. And we discovered that most of them are English or they're French Huguenots. That's the other group I forgot to mention. So all these Huguenots, right? Like Robot down here. Spain wants to stay Catholic. So they would send their Protestants over here to set up colonies for them. And those Protestants were the main pirates during the early period of piracy in the Caribbean and everywhere. So I was starting to see irregularities, and some estates in these really bad places had a lot more artifacts than others. And then I started looking at the cartography of where these sites were, and I realized that they were in spots that were like choke points. So you got to think about sailing when you're thinking about pirates, right? You know, you've got to be able to come in behind them, surprise them, attack them, and you got to have fellow pirates that are going to be there working with you. And when I started looking at this irregularity in the artifacts and the sites, and the fact that I've got a bunch of Huguenots and English people in certain places, things started coming together when I started digging into the history of the Danish West Indies. So, first thing I learned is that Tortola is nothing but a place where you would go if you were in trouble, if you were a pirate, if you were a dishonest person. This is where you went. Like there was one guy that had a plantation and he was rich, and he stabs his neighbor. And what does he do? He goes to Tortuga and he's continuing being a pirate. And then you have St. John here, and you've got Sir Francis Drake Channel. Of course, Sir Francis Drake was here. And then you have Bellamy Key for Black Sam Bellamy. Y'all know that name? The Prince of Pirates. His boat sank up there off of Cape Cod, and they actually have a museum of his ship, the widow up there. If you get a chance, it's pretty fantastic. Go visit. And we're here. And so I started looking at all the namesakes. Privateer Bay off the point of St. John, Rendezvous Bay. Jos van Dyke was a pirate there in 1615. I discovered that. Norman was a pirate that got captured by the Spanish and killed in San Juan. Treasure Island. Treasure Island. This was the one that really got me. We know Treasure Island is Robert Louis Stevenson, right? This is what he based it off of. He on that island and mapped long before he ever wrote this book. You have Spyglass Key. You have Treasure Point. And there was actual treasure buried here multiple times by pirates. So yes. And then you have Dead Chest Island. Yo ho ho, 15 men on a dead man's chest. Does everybody know what a dead man's chest is? A coffin. This is a little pirate trivia there. You can share with other folks. You got Dead Man's Bay. You got Virgin Gorda, which here you got Freebooters Point. When we talked about them, so there's a bunch of Dutch pirates hanging out over there. And St. Croix. St. Croix, I discovered. Louis XIV, he had a big colony there. And he took all of his people off the island in the 1600s and moved them to Cape Haitian, kind of close to Tortuga. And they had actually attacked St. Thomas. And as citizens, it wasn't the military, it was the citizens that were pirates. It was, pretty amazing. But anyway, they went back to check on them, and all the men were gone. They'd gone back to St. Croix because there's nobody there. And when I think about Old Town, and there's nobody there in that early period, you've got a place where you can careen your ship, you can hide out, and you can kind of swing around and take your prizes, right? So, just by using the Virgin Islands, trying to connect us to what we have going on here. And of course, St. Thomas was nothing but pirates. St. Thomas named, when they got there, when the Danes got there, they named their town Tapas. Well, Tapas means beer hall. And everybody knew that if you're a pirate, in order to get your expedition together, you went to the beer hall and you decided what you're going to get. You lose a leg, and you decide all of these things. Who's going to bring the cannons, the shot, the gun? Who's got the ship? Blah, blah, blah. And they lay out whatever, and everybody's going to get. But the beer hall is important. So to name your town Tapas. They did that in the 1670s. Well, when Henry Morgan went on trial for piracy in England, he was going to make his own pirate island, which was St. Kitts. But he had a change of heart, went to England, went on trial, and what do you think happened? He became Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. Of course. And the thing is, but they told him, they said, no, you got to go back and stamp out piracy. What a better pirate than to stamp out piracy. So, as we're kind of coming out of Port Royal in piracy, and you've got all these thousands of pirates, where are they going to go? Well, Denmark just opened up a whole harbor for you. And we have them all come in. We have Cook, not Cook, what's his name? Blackbeard. Well, Blackbeard was close to. We have Thatch Islands in the Virgin Islands with Bellamy. Yeah, he was there. You had Tempest Rogers. You had, what's the one? Captain Kidd came there. Now, all of those books you might have read of where all the treasure went, well, I hate to tell you, but if you read the Danish history, the way the business worked was you got all these commodities. A lot of them are not gold and silver, a lot of times it was, but you might have all these fancy rugs and cloth and silk from all over the world, which of course Kidd had because he had taken that Indian ship illegally. And he'd actually been commissioned to go out and catch pirates, but he had a change of heart, I guess. So he goes into the harbor there in St. Thomas, and they're like, look, go outside the harbor. We don't want to be seen with you. But all of these really rich Dutch planters that had come to St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands, they had set up the business. Now we had an empty island over here in St. Croix where you could get all your boats fixed and repaired, and nobody's going to catch you because there's nobody there. They're kind of afraid of diseases going over there. So they're pretty safe down there. And then you had all of these rich Dutch guys, and these guys are aristocracy, but they own, warehouses in Curacao, Saba, St. Thomas. They're even got warehouses over there in Tortola where nobody goes but the pirates, right? So they're legit, right? They're the ones that are importing all the slaves, stealing all of the gold, all the ivory, killing all of these indentured servants, and buying pirates' treasure. And so that's how the business worked. So these rich guys would buy the treasure, and when the guys bought it from Kidd, he got out of town just in time. It was Beaver Hootsburg. And because it was Admiral Benbow was trying to chase him down. So little history. Anyway, so yeah, are my sites pirate sites? Well, I think so, because they match up to what Russ and Charlie had found and all the other people that were looking at pirates. One of the things that distinguishes a pirate site on land is the food they eat. They're off there in the Mosquito Coast, hanging down out there with all the Native Americans, cutting logwood, a lot of them. And they've learned by living with the Native Americans to eat like the Native Americans. So you got this site that's got little tiny chitons and whelk and just Native American food that I dug in that Taino site. Not cows and pigs and things of that nature, but it distinguishes them from your usual plantation. So these people knew how to switch it up. And if they could get beef, fine, but they knew what they could do in the meantime. So this is how I ended up writing about pirates. I had no idea there was pirates in the Virgin Islands, and then lo and behold, it was a wonderful journey. So this is a pirate map of St. Thomas. Bartholomew Sharp. We get into the 1600s. Now we're like in 1680. So Morgan and them were in the 1650s, right? And then comes this band of college students out of England, Oxford, and they go a pirating all across the Caribbean, and they make it over, into California, and they capture as a Spanish ship that's called the Rosario. Bartholomew Sharp does, and Sorrell's in this too. But he's in this business too with all of these other guys that have attacked here. And they get this one book. You can see this is a book. It's in the British Library. And it has all of the ports. And they steal this book. And when they finally got caught, this book got them off. Because it showed all of the ports that would England could use to attack. They're even though they weren't awarded that. So this guy, Bartholomew Sharp, and where did Bartholomew Sharp go when he retired? He retired at St. Thomas. Tempest robbers retired there. Oh, so many of them retired there. But anyway, what I found incredible about it was one of the pirate governors, Adolf Esmond, he describes what he's done. And all of it is in this Spanish map. It's been redrawn by a pirate to make it in English. He's built this castle. He's built another castle up top. And he brags about those little buildings along the shore. It's like, y'all can come now because I've got all the taverns and all the ladies set up. So now I've put all the infrastructure you need to come and, get rid of your booty. We'll find a way to get it out. Okay. So now we turn to, I want to just talk about this ship right here. This is just a kind of a conceptual drawing. This was a Danish ship that was off the coast. It was a slave ship. It was called the Charlotte Amalie, not our Amalie. It was Danish queen. And these boys out of England dropped down in this boat called the Revenge, and they get in a card game with this boat, and they win it in a card game. Well, you got to think about this. The guy that's in charge of this boat is a pirate back in St. Thomas. But this boat becomes the most famous boat of piracy that I've found so far. I mean, we know Queen Anne's Revenge. But this ship, which was renamed Bachelor's Delight, sailed around the world 5 times.
What was it called?
Bachelor's Delight.
Right.
Yeah. It's part of the reason why we have the College of William and Mary. I'll get to that in just a minute. So Sorel, Bartholomew Sharp, William Dampier is part of this crew too. And he writes his trilogies of his 5 trips around the world as a pirate. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. He actually buys this person in Indonesia, and that skin is supposedly given to Oxford University. I got to move fast. I only got 5 minutes. Okay, here's St. Thomas over there. You can see where if you ever get to St. Thomas, this is a pirate fort. It was built by pirates. So I ended up writing all about this down in the 3rd book of Archaeology of Pirates from my bud. They had seen an article I'd done for the International Congress Recruiting Archaeology. So you can find it on Amazon. Pirate flags. Why did they use a colon cross? If you died aboard ship, this is what they put on your name. So everybody knew this is death. Real quickly, you've got the general history of pirates. So if you want to see more original pictures of what a pirate looks like, you can see they've gone from a bigger leather hat that was probably made by those Buccaneers and all that cattle hide they had, to probably the what's it called, a cavalier is your next hat in the 1600s, and then you have your tricorn. And then you can see there are just a few of original drawings that Daniel Defoe put in his general history of pirates. Okay, now I didn't touch on the piracy here because you can go to the museum's site, and this lady did a wonderful job of talking about all of the pirate expeditions that came through here, particularly McGregor and Henri, the French pirate. But you know what's going on at this time, just to throw it out there, all of those countries in South America are trying to get their independence from Spain. So why wouldn't they take the Spanish? So one of them's kind of representing the Mexican government. I'm not sure which one McGregor represented, but a lot of English, and actually English admirals were helping some of these countries break away from Spain. It's pretty neat. Okay, this is the shipwreck I'm digging right now in the Virgin Islands. Oops. A nice little silver cross there. The pipe stems that kind of help us give it a date of 1740s. Of course, bottles. This might be what she looks like. That's a whole nother talk. I mean, I could go on and on about the shipper. So, we've been in the Caribbean now for, what, almost 30 years. And I'm getting older. I retired from the Park Service. Sorta. If they need my help, I jump in. But we were looking for a place where we'd be close to family. So I had a daughter up in Savannah, and we got more relatives in Jacksonville and Daytona Beach. And so we saw this house in Pirates Wood. And I'm like, okay, well, so this is great. And lo and behold, the people that sold us to us said, yeah, this was where pirates would come in and bring, their booty in, and particularly the enslaved people. So they're sneaking past, they're sneaking past Fort Lynch, which wasn't there yet, of course, and coming in to Pirates Wood and probably smuggling up into Georgia. Because piracy is illegal at the time in America. There's nobody down there watching. I meant to do one little anecdote. I know I'm out of time, but going back to St. Augustine, I love this little story. So a couple of classmates of mine from Florida State, they were getting their PhDs. They were working with Kathy Deegan there in San Juan. In St. Augustine. And they're down in a hole. They're digging, and then mom and daughter step out of the church, and they go by and look down on these ladies, and they're like, see, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't get a job and go to school. That's all I have. Oh, one more thing. I do have one more thing. So, the boat I painted for Isabel, like, I need a ship. I'm like, oh, thank you. So, my neighbor down in the Virgin Islands is this boat. And it was built in 1899. And the story goes that it was Joseph Kennedy's. Now, there was another Joseph Kennedy who was smuggling booze out of Canada during Prohibition. Maybe it was him, but anyway, the story goes that it smuggled booze. So it was somewhere the smuggling boat, pirate boat. It ended up in the Virgin Islands, and there it still had a lot of fun going to the French islands and bringing in the French wine. Of course, there's no law enforcement where it comes in. And I'm not going to incriminate anybody, but I will say the wine was really great. And so I decided I'll use that as my model for the ship. So it's kind of based on a little bit of smuggling, you might say. The price I put on it was $1,800, and half of it was going to go to the museum. And I'm dropping it down to $1,200 or best offer, so I can raise money for the museum. Take a look at it.